So we're in the second part of a sermon series. We were calling it Being Rich at What Matters Most. And before I start, I just want to make sure that we understand that the big idea here, I want to give credit to Andy Stanley. There's a book that he wrote called How to Be Rich. And he just covers a whole lot more than what we can cover in this series. And so a lot of the big ideas are coming from his book. So if you want to get that book and study this in depth, I hope that you will do that. I also want to tell you that we're building principle on principle during this series. And so if you missed last week, you missed a lot of what we're doing. So I encourage you, if you had to miss last week, to go online. Chad keeps the sermons up to date as long as computers are working. He keeps that up to date, so you can go online and see last week, participate in last week's worship, the sermon, so you can kind of build and get that idea of what builds, or what we're building today's sermon on, at least. So, but let me give you a really quick review. We covered some good news and some bad news last week, if you remember. And, the good news is what? We are what? Rich, right. I know some of you say, well, I don't feel rich, but that's because you missed last week, right? We talked about that. According to globalrich.org, if you make $33,000 a year or more, you're in the top 1% of people of wage earners in the world. It just takes $33,000 to be in the top 1%. Now, it's amazing when you think about it that how many of us are what the world would consider mega wealthy, because if you make $80,000 a year or more, then you're in the top 1/10 of 1% of wage earners in the world. And so the fact is, we're blessed. We are really blessed. God has given us more than we need. We're incredibly blessed, and that's good news. We also learned some bad news last week. What's the bad news? You remember? We are what? Rich, yeah. It's kind of, say, what? But when we have money, we have rich problems, right? Like we couldn't get the hair appointment at the time slot that we wanted. And so we had to go a different day, had to get out twice or whatever it might be. Or they put pickles on your hamburger when you told them very specifically not to put pickles on your hamburger. Or your steak is either red or brown instead of exactly that pink color that you wanted it when you ordered it from the server. Or your cell coverage doesn't work in the bathroom when you're trying to do business while you're prepping, getting ready for the day. So we have all these rich people problems. But with that, we do also have some spiritual challenges because we have been so blessed. So last week we looked at the reality that because we've been so blessed, it's really harder for us to depend on God sometimes. It's easier for us to put our hope in the things that we have because we are so blessed than it is for us to put our hope in God. The second thing we looked at last week was that wealth can distract us from our priorities, what really should be our priorities, our true priorities. And because we've been so blessed and been blessed more than most people, then we have the opportunities that can take us away from what's really important in life. The third thing we looked at last week is that we realize that because God has blessed us, we have a tremendous responsibility with what is given. To those that much is given, much is required. Scripture says so. He has given us more than almost everybody else in the world, and because God has given us so much, God expects more from us. So what I want to do today, building off of those ideas, I want to talk to you about the deceitfulness of riches, and I'm using that term very specifically because that's the term that Jesus used in Matthew's Gospel in the 13th chapter. In that chapter, he was telling a story about, he was telling a parable about a farmer who went to plant some seed, and as he was planting the seeds, Jesus then starts talking about how the plant started growing and the deceitfulness of riches choked out all the good things that were supposed to be happening in the field. And it was a metaphor, of course. And what Jesus was saying was that the deceitfulness of riches in this world can choke out our spiritual growth. So I want to dive into detail about the deceitfulness of riches. And so, I want to give you an example of where we live our lives. I was just visiting with a young man who took his family, I think it was Incredible Pizza. It's one of those places where you go and you have pizza, and then you go play the games, and you get these little, you can win tickets, And so, you know how it is, right? You're playing and you're winning tickets, and so the kids, you take your kids or grandkids, and they're doing that, and they're not doing very good. And so, because you want to make sure you get some tickets, you kind of move them over a little bit, and you show them how it's done. You bowl that ball up there and try to get it in that middle circle, or whatever it is that you do, or make the basketball in enough times in the net that you actually get some tickets. And so you kind of move the kids over, because it's important that you get those tickets. You really need the tickets, because if you get enough tickets, you can win a prize that will change your life. Right? If you win enough tickets, you're going to get a prize. And so you go and you win 496 tickets, okay? And you go to cash them in, and you get a little finger puppet made in China that costs 5 cents that you'll never use. It really, you don't need, and it really has no value in the world. But you go back next time, and you're determined to get enough tickets to get the next prize up, which is a straw Chinese finger, whatever thing that you catch your fingers in and can't get them out, and then so you have to throw it away so the kids don't get messed up with it. And then we get in our adult world, and the tickets change, and we start to believe that if we get enough of these tickets, if we get enough of these right here, enough of these tickets, that we're going to be happy, and we're going to be satisfied, and we're going to feel secure. We're going to have some significance. The problem with these tickets, though, is they promise way more than they deliver. They really do. You think you're going to get what matters, and then one day you find out that they buy the type of things that really don't matter. And they have no real lasting value. And sometimes we found out that we spent so much time trying to get these tickets and what they can get that we've lost the most important things in life. In fact, as we talk about the deceitfulness of riches, I want to share with you a key thought. And if you're taking notes, this is this thing is that the world wants you to serve money. That's an important thing for us to understand. Now realize that our economy is based on you spending money, right? You have to have more. And so that's what our economy is based on. And so the world wants us to serve money instead of serving God. Now Jesus has something to say about it, and the scripture's up there, and it says this. Jesus says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be loyal to the one and have contempt for the other. And then he said, what's the last line up there? Would you say it out loud with me? He said, you cannot serve God and wealth. Notice Jesus doesn't say that you can't serve God in power. He doesn't say you can't serve God in popularity, nor does he say you can't serve God and the devil in this passage. He says very specifically, you cannot serve God in wealth or money. So why do you think Jesus said you cannot serve both God and wealth? Well, I would argue it's because wealth is such an attractive false god. It really is. For so many of us, money and things and the promise of what it can buy will be the number one competitor for our hearts. You cannot serve both God and money. Now, why is some money such an attractive false god? Well, it's because money promises only what God can provide. So what does wealth promise? Many things, right? Just go. It's like you're not limited anymore if you have enough wealth. So many things that it offers, but we're going to talk about two today. The first we're going to talk about is the wealth promises happiness. If you have enough money, you're going to be happy. And the second is that money promises security. If you have enough, you can build high enough walls, you can surround yourself with enough or whatever, so you can have security. You think you'll finally be secure. And here's the thing, we've bought into this. if I just had a little bit more in my stack, then I could buy whatever would make me happy. And I don't know what that is for you, but if I had more, then I could buy the shoes, that would match my belt. And because it's not good to have a brown belt and black shoes, right? You guys understand that, right? Yeah. But here, we start buying all these things, and we get, like watching my granddaughters this weekend as we were spending some time with them. They had this little bracelet that Grandma had given them, and so they had something. They had to have a dress, they would, and then they had to have this like a shoe thing, a dress thing, and then a whole outfit and all that, and then they just seemed so happy to get all this matching stuff, bracelet and dress and shoes and all this stuff. And then when we got back in the car, they threw them over the back and forgot to even get them out of the car when we got home, right? It's just like if we get if we get everything together, if we have enough money, we can have all the right clothes, we can have like the newest smartphone, and we can be popular, and we can have a date to the prom, and so then we can get married, and we can have a perfect life because we had enough stuff, right? That's the way we seem to think about life. Instead, I'm going to be unemployed and miserable my whole life if I don't have enough stuff, and I'm not going to have the things I need to be happy if I don't have enough stuff. If only I had a house that had one more bedroom and maybe one more bathroom, and if I could get the new car, maybe with a sunroof or just a couple of extra things, then here's the thing: if I could just have a man cave, if I could have my own man cave, a place I could go into and just be mine, and I could have my own drinks and my own little fridge, and I could have the chair I want and watch what I want on the big screen TV out there, I would be happy. I really would, right? See, the reality is, though, it doesn't matter how much you have, because only God can provide lasting joy. You can get more and more and more and more, and you're still going to want more and more and more, because money does not provide happiness. Only God provides lasting joy through His Son, Jesus Christ. We also believe if I just had enough money, I'd be secure. If I could just pay off all my debt, life would be good. At that point, I would do all these things if I had no debt. But all you have to do is get a whole lot of money and have someone you love really, really get sick, and you realize that money can't buy your way out of that. Suddenly you realize security does not come in what money buys. It only comes in who God is. And so money promises what only God really can provide. That's what we're talking about. So most of us would say, well, I would really never serve wealth. I just don't do that. I'm a saver. I put things back, and so I don't really serve wealth. And I would maybe argue rather gently for some of us that if you've bought something that you don't need with money you don't have, some of us have done that to impress people that we don't even know or like, and if we do some of that from time to time, then we're probably under the power of money. If you're believing that this ticket's right here and what these buy would make you happy or bring some meaning to your life. If you've ever compromised your integrity, if you've ever cheated on an expense report, or if you've downloaded music or a movie that you did not pay for, if you passed off your 12-year-old as 11-year-old because the movie or the food buffet was cheaper, then you're serving money. You're under the illusion that it's going to bring more meaning to you if you have more money. If you've ever neglected your family, trying to earn more money, then I would argue that you're under the power of money. See, what's happening is it's a false god that is promising what only God can provide. And since we are rich, we need to acknowledge that we are. We want to be good at being rich. That's what we're talking about in this whole series, being good at being rich. So our key Bible verse for this series is Paul talking to Timothy. He's coaching this young pastor, this friend, and he says, when you deal with rich people, here's how you want to help them. And so here's what Paul says in verse 17 of 1 Timothy chapter 6. He says, tell people who are rich, we looked at this last week, tell people who are rich at this time not to become egotistical and not to place their hope on their finances, which are uncertain, but instead, he says, where should you put our hope? He said, instead, they need to hope in God who richly provides everything for our enjoyment. Tell those rich people, don't put your hope in wealth, which is uncertain, but instead put your hope in God who richly provides everything for our enjoyment. And then verse 18 said to tell them what? Won't you read this out loud with me, would you? It's on the screens. Tell them to do good, to be rich in good things they do, to be generous and to share with others. Paul says, tell them, don't put your hope in wealth, it's uncertain, but put your hope in God. Now, if you were with us last week, we had a key statement, and I want you to go ahead and say it out loud with you, and it's on the screen, and it says this: God has blessed me with more than I need, I am rich. Why don't you say that with me? God has blessed me with more than I need, I am rich. Now, each week we're going to add a little bit to this statement, and so it's going to get a little bit long by the time we get through. That's okay. This week we're going to add something to it, and this is what I want to add to it. I will not trust in riches, but in God who richly provides. So, won't you say that with me as well? I will not trust in riches, but in God who richly provides. Now let's say it all together. She's going to put the whole thing on the screen. So here we go. You ready? God has blessed me with more than I need. I am rich. I will not trust in riches, but God who richly provides. See, the problem with money is it continues to scream at us, right? You know, if you just had more of me, you'll be happy. If you have more of me, you'll feel significant. And so I want to show you three problems today of those who love and trust money. And if you drop your guard and work with me for a few minutes this morning, I believe that you might see yourself, as I see myself, in one or more of these challenges that we have. The first one is this, if you're taking notes, is this. People who love and trust money, number one, never have enough. They never have enough. If I ask you if you're satisfied with your income, then the answer almost worldwide would be no. You know, really, I would like to have a little more. Are you satisfied with what you have? Well, no, if I had this or a little better of whatever. And so, I kind of want more. So that's an indication that we love or we trust money. And in fact, Solomon, when he was writing in Ecclesiastes, for him it was black and white. In Ecclesiastes 5:10, he said this: the money lover isn't satisfied with money. Neither is the lover of wealth satisfied with income. It just doesn't satisfy. It just won't fill that hole that you have inside. Money just can't do that. So if we're always wanting more, I can promise you it doesn't matter how big your stack gets, you're still going to want more. And Proverbs 18:11 says this: the riches of the wealthy are a strong city and like a high wall, where? In their imagination. I love the imagery of this verse. The rich, and that's us, right? Think of their wealth as a strong defense. We see it as something that's going to protect us, The bad things aren't going to happen because I can buy my way out of those things. But that verse goes on to say that it's only in our imagination. We're imagining that if our stack is big enough, if we just have enough of these, we'll be happy and we'll be secure. It's, as Jesus said, the deceitfulness of riches. It promised something it can't provide. And God, people who love and trust money instead of God, the number one thing is they never have enough. Number two, people who love and trust money find it increasingly difficult to give big. They find it increasingly difficult to give big. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there are many of us here who would love to give big, right? But we don't feel like we can afford it. I mean, man, I would tithe if I could afford it. I'm guessing there's many of us who really believe that this is a wonderful thing that we could do. We could really support some great ministries in our community if we could afford it. Would I do it? If I could win the lottery, man, I would just, I would bless everybody in town. But I'm guessing, that maybe there are also some of us who are waiting till we get wealthier to do the big giving, but what the world tells us and what facts tell us is that the more we make, the less percentage we give. And so here's the thing: we believe in what God's doing through the church. We would like to do more, but we feel we can't afford it. Or we see something, somebody in need, and you think, man, if I just had a little more money, I would just buy them a motor for their van, or I would do this, or I would do something else. I would like to help them out. I'd love to be able to give that person a big tip. I can tell they're having a rough day, and a big tip would be nice, but I really want ice cream, I would like to help that person with their rent maybe, but my stack's just not quite big enough. I need a little bit bigger stack. And what's crazy is it's been proven over and over and over that the wealthier people are, the smaller percentage they give. So who do you think gives the largest percentage on average in our country? I'll tell you, it's the people who make less than $12,000 a year give the largest percentage of their income away. Obviously there are exceptions, and some of you are the exceptions, and that's awesome. But on average, it's been proven again and again that the bigger the stack is, the smaller percentage that people give, and that's not how to be rich in what matters most. That's not how to be rich and to honor God. That's how to be selfish. That's how to be bad at being rich. In fact, Jesus evidently didn't care as much about the amount of what was given as he did about the percentage and our heart. One time in Scripture, you may remember the story, Jesus was watching and there was this very poor widow that came up and she gave a couple of pennies. And, she didn't have any income and she put in 2 pennies offering plate. And Jesus said, oh, she gave more than everybody else here. Well, here are all these rich Pharisees standing around, and they may have given more in amount, but Jesus was impressed with her percentage. She gave it all. She gave it all. How could someone with no stack give it all? The reason is she wasn't trusting in her stack. She was trusting in God who richly provides. So what we tend to say so often is, I'll give when, right? You could finish that statement. Well, I'm going to give more when I get my credit card paid down. If our raise comes through this year, then I'm going to give more. I just have been saving for that house that we really want, and so when we get that house, then I'm going to give more. I've got to help get those grandkids through college, right? Grandkids really need to get through college, and I've been putting back for that. And when I get them through college, then I can take a deep breath, and I'm really going to increase my giving because I really think we're doing some good things. But Scripture tells us that probably won't happen because we've decided that we trust in money through our lives, and so we won't ever really give more. I think God calls us to give and be generous today with what we have, and let tomorrow take care of itself. So I want to let you know that as a church, we lead the way with generosity in our community. We really do. East Cross is awesome, and we do a lot of good stuff here and in the world here. And here's something else: we will give, and we will give, and we will give. As a church, we're going to give. We're going to continue to unleash the 300 of us that attend here every Sunday into our community and around the world and the resources that we pull together, and we're going to give a hand up to all different kinds of people and make a difference in people's lives. We're going to be a big help because that's who we are. We're a rich church, and we're going to act like a rich church. We're going to be good at being rich because that's what God has asked us to do, because God has blessed us with more than we need, and we're rich. And we're not going to just try to build a stack. We probably aren't going to have the largest accounts of all the churches in town. That's not what we're after. We're really going to try to do ministry, and we're going to give, and we're going to be good at being rich in as God calls us to be. And so that's what we're going to do as a church, and I invite you to do that as a person and as a family as well. See, God tells us to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous, and to be willing to share, and that's what we're going to do as a congregation, because we're not going to stink at being rich, okay? We're going to be good at being rich, at what matters most. And, just if you want to get excited about something, give. And God will just bring you a whole sense of peace and security and fullness. So the third thing, if you're taking notes, the last thing, if you're taking notes is, if you love money, you may have money in the bank, but you have no peace in your heart. You may have money in the bank, but you won't have any peace in your heart. And some of you say, well, technically, I don't have a lot of money in the bank, but you know what I'm saying, right? You've got toys in the garage, you got clothes in the closet, you got food in the cabinets. You're blessed. And if you love the stuff more than you love God, or rather than loving God, then you can still have all this stuff, but you still don't have any peace in your hearts. So in Solomon, as he was writing in Proverbs, he said something that I think is so important as a principle. And honestly, my God, most people don't believe it's true. I don't think. But I want to read it to you. And I think when you believe this, what I'm going to read, it can really change how you live your life. The writer of Proverbs says this: better a little with the fear of the Lord than a great treasure with turmoil. Better a little bit with a lot of God than a lot of junk with no God and with all this tension going on. I wonder if we really believe this. A guy was interviewed that manages wealth, and he dealt with some of the richest families in the world. He just didn't even deal with people that made less than billions. And so a guy got to interview him, and so the interviewer asked him, he said, you work with people that are great wealth, and it's always a great blessing to have great wealth, isn't it? Or are there challenges that outweigh the blessings? And this is what this guy's response was. He said that their challenges are more challenging of the really rich people than we could ever imagine there would be. And he said this, and this is a quote, he said, you could not ever begin to imagine how difficult it is to try to deal with all of that wealth. It's almost impossible to get it right. And then the interviewer asked this guy, he said, now, if you have that kind of wealth, if you could have that kind of wealth, would you want it? And his response was this: absolutely not. Not in a million years. Never, ever, ever would I want that kind of wealth. And yet here we are. We're seeking that, right? Just a little more. Just a little more. Just a little more. I see them saying, well, give me, a few million of that few billion you have, and I'll do what I can with it, right? I can see us thinking that, but with great wealth comes great problems, and it's harder to depend on God, and it distracts us from our true priorities, and we have this great responsibility. So let me just be kind of just honest with you for a second here. Right now, probably almost every single one of us made more than our parents ever made. You make more than you ever thought you might make. And especially if in retirement, you're doing very, very well and a lot better than your parents did in retirement. But some of us still today are financially strapped, and some of us still aren't making it very good, and we're still not very happy. And so we're thinking, well, maybe if I just had a little more, I'd be a little happier. And I'm thinking, well, why are we still strapped? Well, because we still keep spending everything God blesses us with instead of sharing some of what God blesses us with. The bottom line is this, that money doesn't solve our problems. And when we're under the influence of money, our lives will not be joyful. We need to trust in God. Money's not going to make our marriages better. Money's not going to help us love one another more. Money's not going to cure the person you love from cancer. Now, if you give to cancer research, hopefully we'll do better in the future. But what people need is more Jesus. That's what we need. More Jesus brings intimacy in our relationships. More Jesus brings focus for us in our lives. More Jesus brings power to our lives. More Jesus brings purpose to our lives. More Jesus brings this divine into our world. And so what we really need is more Jesus. So instead of thinking, I want more money, since we're never going to have enough anyway, right? Then we need to start thinking, I want more Jesus. So every time you see something you want and you think, well, I can't afford that, but man, it would sure be nice to afford that, then just start thinking, what I really need is more Jesus. Write that, tattoo that on your hand so that every time you reach in your pocket to buy something you don't need, you see this, say, I really need more Jesus. That's a pretty good idea. I may do that. Check me next week and see if I got that done, okay? So here's the thing. At whatever level you're at, are you giving big? And I'm closing. Are you giving big wherever you're at, doing whatever kind of finances you have? I would tell us, if I could just sit down with us and chat, I would say this. I would say, don't dare walk around with money in the bank and all the stuff, all the toys and stuff, but not have peace in your heart. That's not the way God intended us to live, because Jesus is peace. God gives us the peace that surpasses all understanding. And you see, once we realize that God has blessed us with more than we need, that we're rich, therefore we will not trust our riches, but we will trust in God who richly provides. Once we understand that, life will be better for us. Would you pray with me?